Greetings and welcome to Flavourful Eats. Today we are doing a good celebration with the lovely Dr. Leah Abraham and her lovely daughter
Kendra.
And we're making?
We're making baklava, a Syrian treat.
A Syrian. So let's go ahead. As per your family tradition, we're making the baklava. I'm to say baklavas, excuse me. I will try. But
That's fine. Any way you want to pronounce it is fine. So first we need our saucepan. So we're going to make syrup first.
Okay. Before
Yes.
we're starting with the syrup,
Yes.
we're going to be pointing out our little ingredients
Sure.
for the syrup.
So for your syrup, you have 2 cups of sugar, 1 cup of water, and then you flavor the syrup. And this is a variable recipe. So you could use a little bit of cinnamon in a cinnamon stick. You could use rose water, and some people even just put a little bit of vanilla in once the syrup is cooked down. We're also going to thicken it at the end with a 1/4 cup or so, up to a 1/3 cup of honey. You don't cook the honey in the syrup.
You don't heat the syrup.
You don't heat the
So I
honey,
have the
yes.
honey, yes.
We just add that when the syrup is cooked. So we're going to add our sugar, add our water. I'm going to rinse the sugar out. Sugar stuck to our bowl a little bit.
And then we
And this-
stir, right?
It's just going to simmer. An occasional stir while we're prepping the rest of the ingredients, the filling, and layering the sheets. But that can just kind of sit quietly on the stove while we're doing everything else. I like a lot of cinnamon in, so in addition to the cinnamon stick, I'm going to put in a little bit of cinnamon. And you can use, if you don't have cinnamon sticks, you can use just cinnamon. If you want to use just the cinnamon sticks, the recipe will work just fine, and every family has their own way of exactly what tastes best to them.
And if by using the cinnamon stick, you're not going to get the powdered look on your syrup. If people are interested, worried about that too.
The cinnamon will dissolve,
dissolve.
all through. It'll be a slightly darker syrup on top. So if you want your end product to be a very light color, the cinnamon stick is a better choice. It gets a tiny bit darker with the cinnamon, but by the time it's all cooked down,
And
it doesn't make a whole lot of difference.
That flavor of cinnamon is universal, right?
So we've got to make the filling for our baklava next. And our filling will have about 3.5, 4 cups of nuts. I generally use walnuts, sometimes a little bit with pecans. Some people occasionally put some pistachio in. Any soft nut that you would like will work just fine. We're also going to add about 2 to 4 tablespoons of sugar, again, per your preference. If you want it nuttier, less sugar. If you want it a little sweeter, a little more sugar. And then another teaspoon of cinnamon in the filling. Again, your option if you want it a little bit spicier in the filling. All of those have to get blended. Can you be the champ and be better than me at getting all of those in the bowl without losing any on the floor? Good job. Keep going. Almost. A few more nuts. You did it. Excellent.
You did that.
Can you add the cinnamon and sugar for me too, please? Thank you. Good
So
job.
it's a good lesson for our little ones to be in the kitchen and learn these things too. We're doing some math here with the counting of the how many teaspoons, tablespoons of sugar and cinnamon,
And if you want to chase it out, here's a spatula.
and some science to know how to mix it up. All good.
The best science in this recipe is adding the butter between the sheets later, because that helps fluff the sheets. There's a chemical reaction. There's
Chemical engineer, we forgot to say. So yes.
Chemistry students like that piece.
Yes, you see, a lot of people don't realize that, if you have your children involved in the kitchen, you're getting all these lessons in one.
You want a nice ground nut with no large pieces, and the cinnamon and sugar get all mixed in. At this point, we're about ready to lay out everything to make the sheets. I'm looking at the syrup, making sure it doesn't boil over. So we want to turn it down a little bit, a nice rolling boil. We're just trying to simmer and reduce after we get to that boil, and an occasional stir. Kendra is now going to put about 90 seconds on and melt our 2 sticks of butter, because this is not a healthy treat. This
a celebration.
is a celebration treat that is a very rich treat.
That's good in the mouth for a
Yes.
little bit, yes.
So I am using phyllo dough that I purchased all already pounded out, and not taking bread dough that I made myself and pounding it with a rolling pin. That would be the traditional way to do it, and one of the reasons why it was a big treat, because it took a long time to roll out from bread dough to these very, very thin sheets. With your sheets, you want to be very careful to thaw them. They come in the freezer case of the phyllo dough sheets, and if you pull them right out of the freezer case and open them up and try to use them, they'll be all wet and stuck together. So giving them a good 24, maybe even 48 hours to come to temperature, defrost, and nice sheets are nice and flat like this, so they're you can lift them apart. Well, we're going to go pretty fast. As soon as that butter is ready, we're going to take out a pastry brush. And, oh, Kendra, you're on the team. Thank you so much. So you're right over there in that corner. And I'm using parchment on the pans today. You can go right in the bottom of the pan if you have a nice, beautiful, clean new pan. The parchment will help us lift things out later. But the first step is we paint the entire space. And the first one will be noisy, but after that it will get quieter. This is going to be a messy process. I washed my hands just before doing this, and I'm going to be putting my hands all over the food.
So, see, another painting lesson on the way.
When you lift the sheets, sometimes they're going to stick together. Just be very gentle. The slower you are with lifting the sheets, the more likely you are to get them out in one piece. And you lay them out on your surface. If they don't match, you can cut them, or you can fold the edges. If you're going to fold the edges, paint again first. So I painted a little bit there, and I'm going to fold that edge down so that it matches my tray.
Ah, right. That's a good tip. Yes, unless you buy your tray to fit the phyllo.
Yes, lots of people will make this in a 8x8 square pan, and you can just take a clean kitchen scissors and cut across, or you can go with a larger pan and folding. Either way works. Lift the layers, layer them every time. A layer of butter in between. Cardiologists will not be happy watching this dish.
Again, we need to do this within reason, right? I mean, one piece is good enough, so don't overindulge.
Sure.
Everything is within reason.
Sure. Wedding celebrations and holiday celebrations, Syrians would have the baklava. The strict, oh, thank you very much for stirring for me. The strict translation of baklava is sweet stuff.
Okay. But it's known in, I mean, it's pronounced in so many different ways in different Middle Eastern places, right?
Yes, there's a Greek version, there's a Syrian version.
Turkish version.
Yes.
And the origins is much spoken about also, different types, different places.
So I did folds as I was bringing the sheets in. So I've got double layers here and double layers on this edge. So I brought this second one in the middle to fold it to try to keep them fairly equal layers. This is a very forgiving recipe. If it's got slightly more layers on one spot than another, it will not affect the taste at all, and you'll barely be able to see any notice if you're getting out and looking at it. So.
Yeah, I was thinking about that. Won't the edges be thicker and the middle thinner? So I'm glad I didn't say anything beforehand.
No, just a tiny bit of difference.
Yeah.
And I like to work with the full sheets. It's easier than cutting them.
Oh, absolutely. Less mess also, right?
And as long as you're working the edges back. Could you be painting for me, Kendra, on this next one? Thank you so much. I'm going to straighten the edges a little bit. Go ahead.
Do you love art?
I'll hold that corner.
Okay.
You don't have to be too worried about the edges being off a little bit. It's very, very hard to get them absolutely stuck together, and you're more likely to tear the sheets.
Right.
Lifting and
Yes.
readjusting and lifting and readjusting. At the very end, we'll tuck all the corners, and it'll be just fine. You can choose how many layers you want in this treat.
How many do you typically put?
I always put at least 8 layers on the bottom.
Okay, before you put the filling
Yes,
in.
it's important to have a good base before the filling.
So while you're chatting, you're remembering how many you got there already?
Yeah, well, I've got, as I'm doing this, they are,
Doubles also.
there are 3 full sheets plus the doubles made 4 in the first set. And then this second set is going to get me to 8. So it's, when I get to the second middle, I've got 8.
It's
Thank you for
interesting to
stirring.
see how that is frothing out, right?
Yeah.
That's the cinnamon helping to get there.
The other strategy that people use is sometimes they'll separate and just count their sheets
Yes.
of what they have and
Yeah.
make sure they put about a third on the bottom, about a third between your nut layers, and then about a third on the top
Right, yes.
is a typical plan.
But you know what? This gets your cognitive skills keeping alert also. So you got to keep, you know,
And it will
life carries on.
yes, it will still taste delicious if you accidentally put
One more.
one more in the middle or one more on the top, as long as you butter between them.
Oh yes, that's important.
It will,
That's
yes.
about the most important step, I think, to bring the yumminess, right?
All right, so we now have 8 layers. We're ready for our nuts. You want to put a thin layer of nuts each time you add a nut layer. And my hands are already touching the food. I'm just going to smooth it out.
These are the
With my
best
hands.
tools,
Yes.
as long as they're clean.
Yes. And now we're back to phyllo. You know, about 2 layers of phyllo in between each nut layer. You can put 2 nut layers, you can put 3, you can even put 4 if your pan is tall enough.
So Kendra, what's the best part of this dish for you?
Getting to eat it.
Do you enjoy helping Mom with it in the kitchen?
Yeah, definitely.
That's the best part, I think. Good quality time together.
I've been saying as we've been doing this, you can put this many layers, that many layers. Syrian cooking did not come from my Syrian grandmother, my Dr. Leah Abraham, with any measurements at all. She did not have a measuring cup in her kitchen. Everything was a little more habuba. And that,
Exactly how my grandmother did it too, and you know, made the most delicious food.
so if you like a little bit thicker with a little more nuts, that's okay.
Is it sticking to the side?
A little bit.
Leah, is the temperature too high for this, or it's okay?
Oh, it's looking good. As long as it's not boiling after that initial bubble
okay.
up and is reducing some such that you get a thick syrup, you're all right. I'm going to borrow your syrup spatula for just a minute to nudge another layer of nuts out. And I love having Kendra here helping so that I'm not getting the nuts and the butter all over everything because my hands are getting a bit sticky here.
That's the name of the game.
It's all right. We turned the oven on earlier. It is preheating.
And that's important, right, to have it preheated.
Yes, especially if you have a convection oven that'll burn the top. You want it to cook gently
Yes.
from the bottom. And we're going to cook at about 350 for about 20 minutes until the pastry is slightly browned on the top.
And that's a moderate oven by any, you know, if somebody's watching in another country where they use Celsius, just remember it's a moderate oven.
Yes.
And if anybody's interested, it's 180 degrees Celsius, 350 degrees Fahrenheit.
Here we're back to chemistry class, having students do the conversions. Here, I'm glad this stuck. When you get them stuck, just pull both of them very gently, teasing them apart. If a sheet rips, it's not going to taste bad. You can just put the ripped pieces on a little bit at a time. That's all fine.
So you obviously got very fresh, I mean, as fresh as you can get from the supermarket, because it's coming out so easily. When you have it too long in the freezer, you can have a problem, correct?
You don't want to keep it for a long time in the freezer, and the more important point as far as I've noticed is you want to thaw it gently.
Yes, yes.
Most times when you have bad phyllo, it is because you've rushed bringing it out and it's still a little bit frozen in the middle, and you get that line across the middle, and every time you pull a sheet up, it'll be stuck right in the middle.
And the gentle way is to put it in the fridge, right?
Yes.
Defrost it in the refrigerator.
Yes, you put it in the refrigerator at least overnight and up to 2 days before you're going to bake. And, oh, you're helping me there. Thank you. And very gently let it thaw and pull it out. And if it's not ready, let it thaw a little bit longer. Getting towards the end of our sheets here. None of these ingredients are going to spoil. Sometimes people will have damp paper towels that they'll put over the top of their sheets. If you're doing it your very first time,
it may be a good idea because you'll be slow.
Yes, it's not a bad idea to take this sheet and put an aluminum foil next to you and put half your sheets over and damp paper towel and aluminum foil and work with half at a time.
To save the earth, if you want to put cloth, you can.
At this speed,
cheesecloth or one of those.
The sheets will be fine, and
Yes.
they're not going to get dry in the time it takes to layer.
Yes, I can see that. You're going pretty fast.
I've done this a few times. It is, do you like this stuff? Enjoy to eat it? Yeah, so, the kids get this every Christmas, and then occasionally when I happen to have a little extra time when I'm baking something for them. So, done this a few times.
By watching Mom do this, I can see that she's quite an avid baker, a cook of some sort that's working quite a bit in the kitchen.
So, as I'm doing these middle layers, every time it's 2 sheets in between the nuts.
So it's 2 sheets and then
2 sheets, nuts, 2 sheets, nuts.
So it's just the first one that you put 8 sheets.
Yes, the first one on the bottom is 8. And I'm going to just get those off. Got nuts on your counter. No.
We can clean it up.
Yes, we'll get it. Everything tidy at the end.
You know, when somebody is tempted, they can eat that just like that.
There are no eggs in the recipe. I'm going to break up the little bits here.
Also, if you put a little bit of syrup in just that and make little balls of it, right? That nut mix.
Yes.
And
We're close
you
to
can
the
also
end,
just
so I'm
make
going to
it
put the last of the nuts in and have a slightly thicker nut layer on my last one. It isn't required at all that the nut layers are thicker or thinner on any particular one. As long as they're not, if they're super fat, the cookie will fall apart. But this layer will be okay. And then I think I've got maybe 5 sheets left here. If your dough is giving you any problem, you want to make sure you keep a sheet that is intact for the top sheet.
Right. That's a very important tip.
Yes, having broken sheets in the middle is all okay. When we get to the end, we're going to be cutting. Could you paint for me? Make sure I have a intact sheet on the bottom. So I'm paging through here, checking my bottom sheet, and the bottom sheet often will be ever so slightly stuck. So I'm going to save that one that's all the way clean. Here, I'm going to pop this down, and you could do that edge too, please. Thank you so much. the last step is cutting, which I'll show you in a little bit. That is easier with a nice intact sheet on the top. Keep painting, you're doing great.
You are doing a really marvelous job there. So you're not putting too much of pressure on it, it just keeps the thing intact.
Yes, that is a good point, having the light brush.
Yes,
To
yes.
gently swipe the butter on. We're not trying to push the butter in, we're just gently delivering the butter.
Yes, the idea of our show is to show, yes, every kind of vegetable can be cooked and every type of thing can be done, but we can indulge every now and again. That's my opinion.
There is protein in this treat.
Yeah, oh yes, I mean walnuts, you've got good omega-3 right there. The only,
Half and half here. Okay, you stir out this one, thank you.
the only thing that's, actually it's not too bad. It's just the sugar and the butter that somebody will be concerned, and more of the sugar than the butter, I think.
Yes.
But even that, you can lessen it if you don't want it. You can still have a good treat.
Yes.
It just screams party when we have baklava, to my mind.
It does. It's a fun treat. I made, I think, 4 trays that we took to my wedding.
Oh, you made this. You made it for the wedding.
I made them the week before,
Oh, okay.
and we
Okay.
brought them
Uh-huh.
to the weddings. I've got 4 Syrian uncles and 5 aunts, and so and it's not something they make every day. So I was thrilled to be able to share that with them. Uncle Raymond hadn't had baklava in a long time, and he got so excited. He ate a half a tray all by himself.
Oh, wow.
that day. So it was a fun
You
thing.
you actually managed to see that? Wow. That was a good wedding, that you know exactly what happened there. Being alert.
My cousin Matthew helped tell me about that.
Okay.
Here's another one that I'm peeling apart very, very gently. Thank you, Kendra.
That is such a lovely story. What a compliment to you. That's an ultimate compliment, right? When somebody enjoys your food.
Yes, it was a treat, and it was part of the Syrian tradition of sharing food with family.
Oh,
So
absolutely.
it was
Wow.
very reminiscent of the family gatherings that we had. The Syrian grandmother on a Sunday in Geneva, New York, where we grew up. There, on any random day, there might be 40 children and their grandchildren showing up at her house, and she would enthusiastically feed them all.
And we never ran out of food, right?
She
Or
never,
out of
no,
food.
she just magically, people would show up with no invitation, no
Exactly how we were
appointment, and
brought
she
up.
would pull food out of the refrigerator and have the Syrian shaidiye chicken noodle dish cooking, and Syrian bread hibis. And everybody would be eating and talking and enjoying the time together.
Yes, it's amazing how they did these things, because growing up, I spent a lot of time. I think I told you, right? I'm from South Africa, and my grandparents live in rural KwaZulu-Natal. So we most times got to visit during the December time.
So I've got my last sheet here. So I'm going to, instead of going on this the way, thank you, Kendra, you're so good. The way I usually have, I'm going to bring the bottom part here so that I have a clean top sheet.
Good idea.
That is just smooth, because when we get to the next cutting step, it's going to be slightly easier. When I folded this over, and I have a clean flat surface on the top. So,
Yeah.
especially if this is the first time you're doing it, lifting the sheets takes a little bit of finger
Training.
skill,
Yes.
and you practice it. It's okay. The next piece, which will be the cutting, that's again takes a little bit of finger skill and practice, but it's easier if you have a nice flat sheet on the top, like we just managed. And use the top sheet. You can be extra generous with your butter, and then going to the corners. I am going to tuck the corners down and in. We weren't really worried about our edges, and they will cook back, but I don't want them out over the edge of the pan so they burn. So I'm tucking in the edges, and then I'm going to butter the edges very generously. If you happen to have a pan that's perfect to your sheet size, you don't have to worry about tucking. You still do want to enthusiastically butter all along the edges. People are painting, they get the middle very well. Or often less generous with the edges. Oh, you found a spot for me. Here at the edges, and then when we do the syrup later, we're going to want to make sure we get all the surface. And use that last little bit. 2 sticks of butter worked just perfectly. You must have been perfect with your painting. Good job. All right, next. This is a great time to use your pizza roller. I am going to butter my pizza roller so it is less likely to stick.
That's a good tip. Could use your pizza roller.
I'm going to do my long sides first.
So are you making this into diamonds?
I am going to make this into diamonds.
Okay.
And I am working here. Gently and slowly. Sheets are moving a little bit as I roll through. I can come up and come back down. This is not a race at all. The less disturbed you make the layers, the easier it'll be to cut and serve later, and the better they'll stick together. So nice and slow is fine. And here you get to decide what your portion size is.
Yes, that's true.
If you want a few small ones, I've got some smaller strips, and then I did a couple larger strips. Now to get the diamonds, you turn it an angle, and it is harder to do this cut set. So I'm going to go slower, and I'm going to go more down and in.
People used to sometimes poke cloves on them too, right? Or is that a different recipe?
No, I've never done holes in this.
I'm saying I thought some people do.
I don't know.
Okay.
The Tblsp Syrian bread loaves,
They have that.
you do holes so they don't puff up when you bake them. I've never heard of that in this, but there's so many different cultures of how
Yes.
baklava and baklava are made that it well could be a thing in someone else's recipe. If something peels, just gently hold it, set it back. Your fingers are already covered in butter from the process of layering these, so your fingers won't stick. Having a helper so things get stirred without you getting everything in the kitchen sticky helps a whole bunch.
And she got her fingers clean.
Yeah.
Did not mess it. Very well trained. Yes, I was saying, so in those times you don't know who and who is coming by. And my grandmother used to go and just get stuff from her garden and just put it together, and we used to have the most delicious meals with sharing with everybody. Our fondest memories growing up. Isn't it amazing how we make memories around food?
Well, food makes the celebrations that families enjoy.
Yes.
Piece gets slightly off, you can just slide it back. These cut edges are going to absorb the syrup later. There, I lost a piece. I can just very gently pop it back.
So you need more butter there.
Yes, you're right, Kendra. Thank you. I do need more butter there. Are you going to take care of that for me? Be very careful if you're doing. Kendra is really good at this. So if you try to butter it after it's already cut, you have to be extra gentle or it will slide. So we are ready to go to the oven. So after about 25 minutes, We were lightly toasted brown along the edges. We pulled our baked sheet out of the oven, and now we're back to our still warm syrup, and we're not going to forget the honey. It's really easy, if you don't have the honey out, to forget the honey at this point because you just got your warm treat out and you're ready to pour. I always have my honey out next to my pan so I don't forget it later. And we've turned the heat off. Kendra's getting the honey in there for us. I'm going to give it a good stir. And then the other thing we're going to want to do so we don't damage the top of our treat is pull that cinnamon stick out. So I will take that bowl for you. Thank you. And you can provide the gymnastics of getting that cinnamon stick out, and we'll drop it very gently on our plate over here. And we're going to get that.
Want me to
Just
help
slide
you?
it right up. Oh, thank you.
There we go.
It's a little warm.
I just don't want to burn your fingertips.
And this is not too hot.
Excuse me.
So now we're at our pouring stage. When we're pouring, we're going to want to get all the surface. So I'm going to pour slowly all the way around and make sure I get every bit with some of the syrup on top. The syrup is going to be absorbed into the treat through those edges. Again, just like with the buttering and the lifting, taking your time. There's no rush. Getting all the way to the corners will help make the corners nice and consistent with the rest of the treat. And if you accidentally don't get someplace, you can grab your turkey baster.
Oh, right.
Pull it out,
Yes.
tip the tray to a corner, and just scoop some up after you're done getting it all onto the cookies and pull them out. It'll take about half an hour to an hour for the syrup to absorb. It looks pretty wet around the corners right now. It won't half an hour from now as it's absorbed into the phyllo layers, making everything nice and sweet.
Salivating, right? Just as you, so deliciously, looks so delicious just pouring it over.
That's still a little warm. So you can, if you're using the turkey baster, turn and from the corner, lift up and put it over any places that you didn't get so that you've got syrup evenly over the whole thing. So this isn't going to be ready to eat until it's cold. So we're not going to throw it in the refrigerator or anything.
No.
We're just going to leave it on the counter for half an hour and then find a nice cutter or knife and get all the way to the edges, separating all the way down to the bottom, and then put them out into plates and on the oven. And here is some that I made yesterday, all set and done.
Oh, thank you so much, Leah, for showing our audience what a nice way to make this beautiful pastry, keeping our traditions in the family, and hope many more people make traditions from this and serve it in their dinner tables during good celebrations or anytime.
Thank you so much for inviting me and for sharing this with everyone.
Yes, and thank you so much for joining us on Flavourful Eats. Till we meet again, always available on ActonTV.org. And I am your host, Hamsha Naidu. Take care. Bye-bye.